Remember to subscribe for daily top Reddit stories. Okay, story time. Serious, students of Reddit who had a sexual relationship with a teacher. How did it start and how did it turn out? I slept with one of my professors in college. At the time I was 19 or 20 and she was in her mid-30s. I went to see her during her office hours. We talked for a few minutes and when I went to leave she gave me a long hug and told me, "You give really nice hugs," as she held onto my arms. I asked for her number and went on my way. We exchanged a few flirty text message over the next few days before she invited me over to her apartment to help her hook up a new TV she had bought. We ended up sleeping together about 10 times before she moved away to take a new job at a different school. My 8th grade teacher. This was during the 80s before all the scandals, when no one really cared if a female teacher was spending a lot of time alone with one of her students. I was 14. She was mid-40s and a family friend who had known me since I was a little kid. She asked me to volunteer for a school activity that had us spending time together after class and occasionally off campus. My mom knew her so wasn't bothered I was spending so much time with her. She had always teased and playfully touched me as a kid. When we were alone after class, she started touching me more and flirting and talking about intimate things like her divorce and asking me if I had a girlfriend yet. She escalated the intimacy through the year, pushing boundaries a little more each time. We started having sex that summer. It went on for about 3 months. She ended it once I went to high school. My family moved out of state after my freshman year. I had a long talk with her before leaving and we parted on good terms. I never spoke to her again, but heard she eventually remarried and became vice principal at another school. She died a few years ago. I'm almost 50 and still think about her quite often. I guess I technically had a sexual relationship with a teacher. She was the lab tech for my invertebrate zoology lab and refused to do anything with me until after the class. After classes, we partied and hooked up quite a lot. After a year of us still being together, other TAs started dating undergrads. 6-7 years later, we're married and have a kid together. Edit 2. My wife says it's 7 years. What does she know? I fell in love with the workshop supervisor at my university that guides the workshop that I need for my education. She is about a year older than I am. I am doing some small arts and crafts and leatherworking. She was interested in getting something and she bought something custom. I can't remember how it started out, but for some reason or another, we had some drinks which ended in a night spent together and a sexual relationship. We discovered an attraction to each other. She went to the faculty director with the situation and explained it. Since she cannot give marks on my work and is only a guide in the eyes of the university, they approved of the relationship. That was about 3 years ago. We are still together as I am finishing my education. The relationship moved on from the sexual flirt which it all started with to something deep. We live together for 2 years now and she helps me something with running the 2 companies that I set up aside my study. When I finish my education next year I will even propose to her. Small edit. I just want to clarify that at the start of this relation we well pasted the 18 years old mark. I went to a vocational high school and attended the culinary program for 3 years. The baking instructor pastry chef was 7 years older than me and we grew up in the same small town. When I turned 18 and he left for another profession, we went on a few dates and had sex a couple times. We weren't a good fit together and ended on amicable terms. Pretty uneventful. There was a super hot student teacher that was at our school, so he was only like 22-23 maybe. Does that count? I was 17 and it was at our graduation dinner when we had snuck a bottle of passion pop in. So we were pretty tipsy. I told him I always thought he was hot and before I knew it his hands were down my pants. We still had about 3 weeks to go before we left school. So spent the next week ducking around the school and nearly getting caught a bunch of times. It was pretty ducking hot to be honest and I still think about him from time to time. Happened to me when I was in 7th grade. She was my conversations teacher. To be honest, she was my first crush which started when I was in 4th grade. She knew my parents, so sometimes I had to stay with her when they were late to pick me up from school. It happened 2 months before finals. She told me that she wanted to kiss me and if I was okay with this. I changed my school and she left town some years later. The dilemma is, although I remember time spent with her very fondly, I wouldn't want any other kid to be in the situation as I was in. When I was 19 I dated a professor at my university for a few months. I wasn't his student but he taught some of my friends. We met randomly at a club. And I had no idea he was a professor at my uni until a few days later when we started texting. He was really hot. He had dark hair and bright blue eyes and told me that his female students would flirt with him in office hours. He was 33, so very young for a professor but pretty old for me at the time. It was fun for a bit. He was not happy when we realized he taught some of my friends. The day we realized he taught my friends was when I was at his apartment a couple weeks after meeting and I asked to see some of his class materials. He thought it would be interesting if I could tell the difference between a BS essay and a great essay, even if I wasn't familiar with the subject. So I started reading and realized the BS essay with the failing grade had my friend's name at the top. He was very upset because apparently it's some sort of privacy violation that I was looking at a failed assignment. But I thought it was sexy that he thought my friend's essay sucked. Really played up his position of power in my mind. So I actually didn't know she was my teacher. She was maybe 23-24 and I just turned 17. I was in California during summer vacation. Went to Disneyland. California Adventure. All the fun stuff. Met her while in line for Winnie the Pooh ride. None of my friends wanted to go with me. We had fun. Hit it off. And eventually go to her hotel room. Spent the weekend meeting up and hanging out and then we parted ways. First day of the new semester comes around and I see her in the classroom and I'm excited. I didn't know she went to this school and so I went in and sat down and she goes up to the front of the room and introduced herself to everyone. Then we do the whole get to know each other thing and what we did over summer. Got to me her face turned purple like she couldn't breathe. I'm not a student anymore. It happened in the 90s when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And went on for more than a year. It started with making me sit on his thighs often and I could feel his erection. I never knew what to think of it as I never got any training or attention from parents about situations of sexual abuse. It went on from there. After 22 years of being a biologically straight guy I still remember what that dirty stinking pen 15 tasted like. The experience gave me depression and anxiety and inability to trust a relationship and get freaked out when I see a kid sitting on any man's lap. I woke up after a night full of bad dreams feeling sick in my stomach. Forgive me if I don't respond any further, and thanks immensely for your kind words and incredible support. It's important to protect and keep every child away from such negative forces cause we remember. Downloaded Tinder and he was my first match. Technically, he was studying to become a teacher and working at the school while doing that, but was seen as a member of the staff. I was 5 months away from completing high school at this point, and already 18. He was 23, and while we had an emotional relationship, he refused to do anything sexual or physical until after I'd graduated. When I was 17 I had a fake it and went out to the bar with a couple older friends after a hockey game. We met a group of girls out and we hung out for most of the night. I ended up going home with one of the girls. We hooked up that night. We exchanged numbers and I left in the morning. So Monday comes around, I go to school and I walk into my first period class and the same girl I hooked up with is the supply teacher. Her face was about as red as an apple and I was strutting my seat like Vince ducking McMahon. I had a crush on a professor in college. Friend and I got drunk and decided to see if we could find his house because I got a hold of his address somehow. I was 21 too and he was 40 plus. Anyway, stumbling around like idiots in the dark and he comes out with a ball bat and was like a data sumoba. What are you doing? And I realized the only way out was through. So I fessed up to basically everything and ended by saying, I'm so embarrassed. You should invite us in for a glass of wine. And he did. We started hooking up and then for about 2 years the sex was great, but then I moved and it didn't work long distance. He was a great cook, really supportive and kind, and always had great magic dragon. I actually really liked him but of course, he never wanted anything serious and we're not in contact anymore. Mine may not count but I was 21 and in college and using a Cupid and I matched with this cute girl who's a grad student. We hit it off and our fields of study are similar but not the same so there's no chance there'll be a conflict of interest or anything so we go out on a date to a dive bar, get a bit drunk, hit it off, Go back to her place to drink more and screw. A few days later the semester starts and among my classes I'm taking a statistics for people who can't do math class and who should be my teacher but miss let me lick wine off her tits. For like ethics reasons I couldn't keep screwing her while she was my teacher, but once the semester was over we hooked up a few more times. Not sure if it counts, but I dated my high school teacher 6 months after I graduated. He was my junior year history teacher. Had a massive crush on him in class and he probably knew, but he never did anything inappropriate. Strictly a teacher-student relationship. He was 29. Got in trouble as a teacher for going against the grain. Had tattoos and a dad bod. I was super into it. Always thought he was really intelligent too, but looking back I realize he had just had more time to form his own opinions about the world. During my first semester in college I took a chance and hit him up. We kind of hit it off and dated for 6 months. 3 months in he told me that this was the longest relationship he'd had since he was in high school. I lived with him briefly during summer break in college. One night I went out with some friends and ended up getting roofied and raped. I'm not sure he understood that it was great because he pretty much broke up with me on the spot when he got home from work and I told him what happened. I packed my sheet and called my parents to come pick me up because I didn't have a car yet, lol. My 11th grade chem teacher. It just kind of started. He was very sexual toward me. I just kind of helped instigate it. He got fired for a different reason, lol. But we still hook up sometimes. Boned a teacher's aide intern that was a student at local community college my senior year. She was previously a student at this school and lived relatively close to my neighborhood. I had a study hall after lunch, which essentially meant I had a 2-hour lunch. She was only 3 years older and we had flirted a lot when she was still in school at the HS my sophomore year. Unfortunately not everyone in this thread situation was as casual. My heart goes out to anyone that was actually abused. Technically not a teacher, more like a trainee teacher, not quite sure how to call it in English. I was 16, she was 22. She wasn't only hot as duck, but even played the same games as I did. Had a similar humor and she studied to become a history ed teacher, my 2 absolute favorite subjects. Over time, she figured out I was very good at IT stuff, so she asked me to teach her more advanced programming stuff. She was very much at the beginning, so I had a lot to teach her. After a month of meeting up for purely educational purposes, she asked me out for a movie, which we actually watched, and one of the best bowl jobs I have ever received, not gonna lie. We pretty much were together for 3 years until she had to move away. We're still in contact though through an MMO we play, but she's married now, so I'm not getting one of those bowl jobs again. When I was 10 there was an after school program that I attended while my parents worked. It was there I met her. As a student of hers I was a class clown and ended up getting kicked out of her class and she requested to have me move to another class. Didn't think anything of it and moved on with life. Later in life I'm 22 meters and meet this gorgeous 31F who just moved into my neighborhood. We hit it off quickly. We start spending all day and night together. I practically moved in with her. One day she tells me about being a teacher and how she used to be an after-school program teacher for this middle school down the road. I casually state that I had actually went to that same program. The dots hadn't been put together yet. She goes on to describe a good friend of mine from back then and says there was this one little asshole that I had to kick out of my class. With a cocked eyebrow, everything became so clear. I was that little asshole that she had to have removed from her class all those years ago. Didn't stop us. I was hot for teacher. Slept with a teacher in college. I was 18, he was late 20s. He was hot, I was hot. Went to his house, had one of the best sessions of 6 I've ever had. He decided to only have it as a one-time thing, which I agreed to. Never told anyone about it because it was consensual and no one's business. Although I do remember having a conversation with him after the act in college with other students present and he said something which he had said while we were together at his house. Never blushed so hard in my life. I slept with my art history professor as a freshman in college. It was a class mostly focused on Chinese and Japanese ancient art. I was having trouble with the class and all the data dump of information. I asked her if I could do some extra credit work. She said to come to her office later that day. We started talking more and more because she liked my art, or she was just flirting with me. Now that I think about it, well, She asked me over to her house. She wanted to show me some of her art. She was in her late 40s and I was 18. I didn't think anything about it. Then, when I showed up at her house, she said she had to go change real quick. After a minute or so, she called me into the bedroom. When I saw her in her bra and panties, laying on her bed, I quickly thought back to the time we spent together and realized that I had it all wrong. But, I was happy to be wrong at that time. It didn't. She was a not very attractive old woman who smoked too much, so she sounded like Joan Rivers. I politely declined, but perhaps I should have gone for it because I ended up getting a C in her class. Should have got an A, because awkward. My martial arts instructor. I was 24, he was 51. He made the first move when he asked me to stay after for privates. Obviously, there was a clear power imbalance. He set up the school so he was basically a god. It was honestly pretty hot, but very intense. We loved each other a lot. I was kicked out of the school when his business partner found out, which was super ducking painful because I loved the art and the people. It was like my community. We are still friends, but sometimes I hate him for all I went through. I was 16 when I was starting to figure out my sexuality and I had a massive crush on my teacher. I was absent from class for a bit, and she offered to help me catch up. We exchanged numbers. She's a good 18 years older than I am. By the end of the semester we were talking non-stop and it became quite flirty. I knew she was not good for me, but continued anyway. Nothing sexual happened between us, but it became pretty serious. Then something just clicked inside her and she didn't talk to me as much and didn't want to spend as much time together. We drifted apart and she moved to another school for a better job opportunity. I saw her a few times after that, just for lunch or coffee, over the course of 2 years. But I haven't seen her in 2 years. I wish I could get an explanation as to why she left me high and dry. I mean, I get it. I was 16. But then she shouldn't have gone after me. I often get the urge to message her, because I miss her. I miss having that connection with someone. Honestly would have sworn I loved her. I got together with my college language teacher, ended up dating for 2 years, living together for 1 and almost getting married. Broke up because we were fighting too much. Was great until it wasn't. Till there have been more teachers ducking their students than there have been corners of it in real life. My best friend at school was pretty much the definition of jailbait. She had reasons, but her behavior was totally messed up. She was obsessed with one of our teachers, who was friends with her parents. She used to intentionally walk around in underwear and a long t-shirt and reach up to open cupboards in the kitchen when he visited. His classroom was on the ground floor and had windows at the back, so one day she snuck over and flashed him her bobs. She was convinced he fancied her, but looking back, her behavior was absolutely awful and it must have been so awkward for him to have a 15-year-old throwing herself at him. Nothing ever came of it, but her boyfriend shortly after that was 18 and frequently messaged me how freaked out he was that they'd get caught. I totally think him having a relationship with her was wrong, but I can sympathize with his position a bit because she was crazy manipulative and relentless when she wanted a guy. Shoot, I gotta go get smashed. Thanks for listening. If I sparked joy, hit me with a like and subscribe. I make new videos every day. Till then, check out another video or leave a comment. I love you. Have a great day, you exquisite unstoppable person.